Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. It is 11:52, March 28th. Pretty cold day. It got really cold last night. During the day it was really nice for the most part, and then it got really cold again. So, yeah, pretty unpredictable weather. It's technically well, yesterday was Friday, so it was a full it's been a full week since we've been into spring, but yesterday didn't really feel like it. But it got cold yesterday and last night, especially late last night, like past 11 o'clock. So I had to take my electronics again out of my music space. So anyway, but speaking of electronics, we have our show tonight with Quantum at the American Legion Hall. It's part of this. Well, it's part of the series that a local band, really great band called the Phil Hummer. They're called Phil Hummer and the White Falcons. Really great band. They live right in town, right in Belfast, pretty much. And Phil and Ray, who it's just essentially a duo, but I've been fortunate to play with them over the years. But usually they just play as a trio or a duo. So, and like it was probably a year or two ago, I used to play with them fairly regularly. We had a pretty cool residency at Hay Sailor a few years back. And we would play, I think it was almost every Sunday for a while. And then there was a few other gigs that we did. But then going into that particular year when I was doing those shows, the summer was coming, and they were, booking gigs for the summer as a band usually does. And there were a few gigs I wasn't able to make, so they have like a pool of different drummers that they've been using, and then so I didn't play with them for a while, and then probably last winter I played a couple of gigs. I played a few gigs with them at the Legion Hall. They started this music series at the American Legion Hall in Belfast about, I think it's got to be at least a year. And they do like a bi-monthly music series at the Legion Hall where they have like three different bands play. They usually play the White Falcons, and then they usually have two other groups. They have, all kinds of different musicians. They sometimes have solo artists, and then they have full bands. It's pretty fun. I've done it a couple times. I played with them. Two bands that I play in, Bookhead Sweet Tooth, played there once. That was probably the last time I was there, and I also played with the White Falcons that night. And then we did an Osmia show there also last year. This year, or tonight, we're going to be doing a Quantum set, so that should be interesting. I'm also going to be playing with Phil tonight and Ray as part of their band. So this will be the first of, well, first time I've played with them in a wicked long time. And this will be our first time as Quantum playing at this series. And they do this, I think they do it throughout the summer. It's usually winter, fall time is when they usually do it, but I think they do it throughout the year. Maybe they take the summers off. But anyway, the Legion Hall in Belfast is a very cool spot. It's got a big stage, big dance floor. For a Legion Hall, it's kind of one of the best. Well, just in general, it's kind of one of the coolest venues around. I mean, the sheer amount of space in the room is great. They have the bar right there. They have pool tables. There's pretty good sound. Pretty nice, pretty good acoustics in that room too. So I've played there before over the years with different bands. I actually played a Quantum show there a long time ago. So and it's a big venue for the All Roads Festival that comes to town every summer. They usually use that as one of their major venues. So it's a cool spot. So come on by. It starts at like 7:30. There's going to be an artist, Asa Irons, who's a really cool like soloist, singer songwriter, kind of interesting, like acoustic. I don't know, bluegrass folk stuff, but rock, a little bit of indie stuff. And then White Falcons are going to play after that, I believe. They're going to go on second, and then Quantum's going to close the show. So, so yeah, this will also be. I haven't really formally announced it, but this is also a pretty big thing for Quantum. But if we this will be our last gig with Quantum as far as doing it as a duo. My great friend and comrade for many, many, many years, Mike Whitehead, has decided to move on from playing with Quantum. There's just been he felt like it's kind of reached it's reached a certain point where he kind of feels like it's time to kind of move on to do different things, and and it's kind of run its course for him, and I totally understand that. So this will be our last show together as a duo. I will continue on as Quantum, and the band Quantum's not breaking up by any means, but the band will be different, and it's going to be after tonight. It's going to be just me. It's just going to be a solo show, so it'll be a real interesting kind of thing. Mike and I have played gigs together for a super long time. I mean, we've played in Quantum together for 10 years, which is a trip. It's crazy. And over the years, we've played together for, geez, in so many different bands. I mean, one of the bands that we were in last year that kind of folded or broke up was Electric Bonfire, and that was a really cool rock band. We played in that band together for probably 4 years or so, 3 to 4 years at least. And it's been about a year since that band broke up, and that was a really cool project. He played bass in that band also. Mike Whitehead, really great friend, and again, this whole kind of end to this whole time is under good circumstances. There's no stress or fighting or any BS. It's just kind of a personal decision, and I totally respect him. I feel like everything I have been able to do, there's a few things I've done in my life that I'm really really proud of, and feel like I can get behind and own it and feel really proud of. And I really attribute so many of those things to Mike in a lot of ways, because Mike has years and years and years of experience as a musician, and especially from the jazz world, and has always been super inspiring to me. Also, I've always gotten a lot of throughout the years. I've always gotten a lot of great advice from Mike. We've become over the years really really close as friends. So, and again, so many different projects we had aside from Quantum, which is probably with Quantum and kind of our, you know, thing that we've been doing with this band. That's probably the longest, band relationship thing that we've had that's lasted this long. And before Electric Bonfire, and it also was happening while that band was going on, but we had two different jazz groups as well. Mike is he's a really great bass player, and he's a really great recording engineer. He teaches at Bay Chamber. Pretty extraordinarily talented guy, a wealth of knowledge of music. Has really helped me develop, for what it is as a writer, you know. So, but his main instrument is jazz, is trumpet, and his background is in the jazz world. So we had a jazz group that hasn't played in a while. It's not, I guess you could say, it never like officially broke up. It just kind of kind of went away to a degree. Basically, we just didn't have any gigs. But we had it for a few years, and that was the Whitehead Dean Group. And that was a jazz group, a little bit more of like a modern, electric kind of Miles Davis inspired jazz group. Really, really cool. We that band, it's been probably, geez, at least a year, maybe more, since we've played a gig. But before that, we had the band together for about 4 or 5 years, I would say. Had a pretty good amount of gigs. We were playing around town. We had a really cool residency back at the Fog Bar and Grill, which has now been closed for a long time. Also had a really great residency there with Quantum when we were developing. This is going back, 6 years ago now. It's crazy, but we had both bands had a good residency there, and then we ended up playing other gigs. We also before that, Mike had a different jazz group, which was more acoustic based, called the Michael Whitehead group, which was a jazz group, and that was a little bit different. That was a little bit more acoustic based. Oh, I guess a little bit more jazz, like straight ahead oriented kind of music. We would do some real book tunes and then do some of Mike's tunes, and we also Tom Luther, a really great friend and amazing piano player, was in that band. Spike Hassan was in that band. Mitch Markowitz was in the Whitehead Dean group, and also the great and fantastic Len Dubois. So before the Whitehead Dean group, we had the Mike Whitehead group that we had, and we had that band for quite a few years, actually, probably 4 or 5 years. And we used to play fairly regularly. We used to host a jam at the Highland Cafe, which was a really great venue back in the day, quite a few years ago now. That was a really awesome spot. It was a coffee house slash music venue. We had a really cool residency playing there with the Whitehead Dean group, or sorry, the Michael Whitehead group. And then we also used to host a jazz jam there, and that was a really great time. The Highland Cafe was such an awesome spot because that place was so pivotal in regards to kind of launching more or less the careers of certain bands. I know of a couple of other musicians that started these newer projects and were able to kind of basically launch them and have their first show or first showcase at that Highland Cafe. So it was a really great springboard for local musicians who were starting new projects and, original based bands. It was also a really great thing for Quantum because we played our very first gig as Quantum there. So, yeah, and we had a great run with the jazz group. I listen to jazz all the time. I'm a big fan. I'm always practicing on it. I don't really get a chance to play jazz now, occasionally, but I feel like jazz is one of those art forms. Well, I think music in general and art in general, but I think there's something special and really magical about the jazz genre where I feel like it's something you gotta constantly work at and exercise and always try to learn new things and explore new things. And it's hard to do that, if you don't have a group that's playing it. But anyway, and Mike also had another band that he started that we had for probably about 4 or 5 years also, and that was a band called People of Earth. And that was kind of like an 80s inspired, kind of a new wave dance band. The stuff was very similar to, had like a Talking Heads vibe. We also played a lot of reggae tunes, which was really cool. And that was with Kristen Burkholder, Alan Boyer, the great Jeff Weinberger, and Mike played bass. I played drums in that band. And that was a dance band. That was like more of a party band. We did quite a few covers, but we also did a lot of original tunes, mostly by Mike and also Jeff Weinberger. And then the band started to kind of write tunes together. So we got to a place of where we were kind of 50-50 almost with, you know, covers and then original material. And the stuff was definitely like party dance music, a lot of reggae tunes. That band was great for a while. We had a nice little run. We weren't together. Well, we were together for probably 4 or 5 years, I would say, but had a great little run. Um, we played a lot of local gigs for a while. We had a little stretch of time where there was some pretty good little, a little bit of a buzz, or people that were coming to our shows pretty regularly. And then a few years back now, that band folded. We had a key member of that band leave the band, and he was such a big part of the band. We tried to carry on without him and tried to replace him, but it was too hard. So we, you know, we ended up pulling the plug on People of Earth. But that was a band that Mike had put together. It was his baby. It was his whole concept. We actually played at the Legion Hall a couple times in the past, but that was a really fun band. Learned a lot about dance music, funk music. Also, we played a lot of reggae tunes, so that was a really cool thing to learn and get and to dive into more. And we had, there were various other projects that we had over the years too. We had another jazz group that was run by Tom Luther before that for a couple of years, which I can't even remember the name of it because it was so long ago. We had another band that we played in together years ago, Sage for Someone, which was like a folky rock band. And then throughout the years we've done, a lot of like, I guess, like pickup gigs where there's a gig that comes up and one of us gets asked and we like put together a band and try to put together a band and do the show. So we did a lot of gigs like that, and function gigs and so many fucking gigs. It's crazy. But again, it's like every time I've worked with Mike, whether and we also have done a lot of recording together too. We've done, probably about 5 records together. We did a record for Sage for Someone a long time ago. We did a demo, but we never did it. We never really did anything with it with People of Earth. We've done about 4 or 5 Quantum albums together. So he also was a real pivotal guy for me as far as learning about recording. I was I was never really into recording. It was really hard for me, and I never could really be present and get into it. And then through all of our work together, I started to really enjoy the process of recording and writing music, and now it's one of my favorite things to do. So I learned a lot from him through that. Many recording projects, especially a lot of quantum projects through that, and then a few other different projects throughout the years too, as far as recording. So yeah, lots of things. It's pretty staggering. So tonight will be our last show together, working together in Quantum, and Quantum will continue on. I I've done a few. Quantum has been together for 10 years, which is crazy, but we have pretty good amount of albums together throughout the years. Mike was also I started a tiny, tiny, tiny little record label quite a few years ago, kind of the start of when we started Quantum, Berenice Records, which still actually exists, and we it was a really great partnership because you know, there's a lot of independent labels, and as we know, the record industry itself is, it doesn't really. exist like it used to. Or it doesn't really exist anymore per se. But I had always had this dream of starting, a record label. Um, you know, for many 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 years, I'd always had this dream, and I always had this dream of like trying to. Two of my dreams that I always wanted to kind of do someday was direct a movie. Always wanted to direct a movie. I did a little bit of that, and it was really fun. Never was never really proud of the project, the end result, but it was a fun experience. And at some point, I might try it again. We'll see. And I'd always wanted to start an electronic group. And then the other thing I always wanted to do was to try to start my own tiny little record label. And so we started this label, and I had a web designer, Al Author, who I worked with extensively. We got together all the time, built a website, got everything copyrighted, and Mike is a really fantastic recording engineer. So what we were doing was we kind of built up this partnership of where we could be everything could be done in house. And that's what we've done for almost 10 years, where we were all self-contained, and we were able to record at a really nice studio, his studio. He had a portable studio, and then he also has a studio at his house in Thomaston, Maine. So we were able to kind of re-record music, and mix it, master it, and it was all self-contained, press our own CDs, so there was no like financial overhead with anything, and release it, put it out there, and market it that way. And we kind of made it a thing about 10 years ago, and I launched the whole kind of record label with I did a solo record, a solo album for the label, which was kind of the launch. And then after that, I kind of switched over to doing primarily Quantum records. I've worked a little bit with other artists. There was one other artist that I did work with that was kind of technically signed on, if you want to call it that, to Berenice Records. And we did press a record, press a vinyl, and that was a very mixed experience. It was very hard. It was also cool to do it, to get the experience, but it was also like not the best experience. So I kind of moved on from working with that artist, and I just kind of moved it to where I'm just, I just kind of stepped into a place of where I was just going to make it for, you know, our Quantum records, and that's what it's been for about 7 or 8 years. And again, it's tiny, tiny little thing, but it was, it kind of initially like things were going really well, and it's still Berenice still exists, but it was a little bit of this, kind of making this dream happen, and that was really all, again, like many, many things, I couldn't have done that without Mike. So, this marks a big change, and this is the only project or band with Quantum. All of those other bands have folded or changed or broken up, and Quantum's the only thing, the last band standing. So this is the end of our partnership together. So this will be an interesting time. I've had to play a few gigs with Quantum solo. It was like this thing of where earlier on, the first 2 years when we were going as Quantum, and I do all the booking for that band, and do it's kind of my weird little baby, so I do all the work, booking gigs and trying to coordinate schedules and all that stuff, and do that, and then I do all the promotion for shows and what have you. And but earlier on in the first few years, first 5 years or so of the band, if we had a gig that would come up, and if Mike couldn't do it or we both couldn't do it, then I would usually pass on the gig. And then over time, we kind of moved into a place of like, well, if the opportunity's there, Mike would be like, you should just, do it solo and see if it will lead to other gigs. So there was, probably about five, 4 or 5 gigs that I can remember over the years that I did end up playing solo. But for the most part, it's been the two of us for a long time. So yeah, I just wanted to, make an announcement about that. I've told a few people about it, and as far as shifting bands and bands that break up, you know, and you have various degrees of like, where some bands break up, and I've been in that experience where it's kind of like a fucking nightmare where it's hard sometimes negotiating and navigating with people. People are hard to work with sometimes, and I know probably people say that about me, but it's when you're in a business, because it is kind of a business, and you're working together, but then you're also doing something kind of artistic. So everyone in that space that you're working with, like you're kind of, you're revealing these truths about you. You're putting yourself in a vulnerable place. It's very personal. So that, and then of course that brings in a lot of emotion. So, it's a very sensitive thing, but it's a beautiful thing. And, there's that thing too with business and friendship, where I've been in situations before of where I've been in bands or projects of where, it's more or less just kind of a business, you know, partnership where they hire me or whatnot to do a gig and then or to do a recording or something. And I only see them in that capacity or those people. And I only see them or spend time with them in that capacity. And I have things like that, many examples of that I have done over the years, and I kind of still do. And I really think that's as far as putting together a band and a project, to keep it healthy and professional. I kind of feel like that's the way to go. Just to keep it focused on just the objective of what you're coming together for. But there's been many many examples of where I've been in bands and projects of where I have become really close, or a real deep friendship comes out of us working together, and we end up becoming buddies. Even I've had examples too where I've like girlfriends of mine, long relationships that I've had where we have started bands or worked together. But more times than not, or I have been in bands with friends, and sometimes where the friendship would develop from us being in a band together, or vice versa. I'm friends with them for maybe some time, and then we ended up, getting putting together a project, and which is fun. And I still have a good amount of those friends and friendships. But on the other kind of side of things, sometimes it makes it complicated because your friendship, personal thing, business relationship kind of becomes this, you know, gets all intertwined. So if there's like a rift or something happens that is not easy, that can cause a lot of drama. And I don't like drama. So I've had a lot of situations, unfortunately, where that happens. Where you're in a friendship relationship, but then you're also a partner with them in the music in this, project band or whatever it is, whether it's a project band or a regular working band. And when time comes for whatever reason for that band to kind of blow up or implode, that can cause a lot of, stress and aggravation, fights and all that shit. And I've had that experience a few too many times, and that can be really ugly. I've also had a lot of situations where projects kind of come to an end, and you just kind of call it a day, and it's pretty amicable, and it's it's you just kind of something's moving on to the next phase, and it's easy to kind of to move on from. But I will say that this situation with Mike and I, being that we've been friends and so close to each other for many many years, even before, like last year, I think marked our 10-year anniversary as Quantum, and our relationship goes even, you know, farther back. But I will say, and it's always been a kind of a funny thing, but I totally mean it. But a lot of the times, I've always referred to Mike as kind of being my Obi-Wan Kenobi. A lot of the times at Quantum Gigs, I've mentioned Mike as that because I do think he's a little bit older. He's got just incredible well of experience and deep knowledge of jazz and how to write music, how to record music. Just the whole like certain level of professionalism. Bringing that to every situation. So I will have to say that out of all of the kind of separations or end to a relationship as far as being creative, but I will stress that Quantum is not breaking up. It will keep going. This kind of partnership that Mike and I have had has been has been the easiest. It's still, kind of a thing that I'm coming to terms with because it's a big thing because it's been a thing we've been together for so long, and we've played so many shows together. It's we've gone on tour together. Just so many things. I mean, and we've played some amazing, have had some amazing, absolutely amazing shows, and just been able to kind of keep this weird thing together for so long. But I will say, out of in those situations, this is like the healthiest, the most amicable, and respectful situation as far as two people parting. So I wanted to just do a quick show on some new things and some big changes. So thanks again, and we'll see you next time. Peace.